What's up guys, Excaliblator here and welcome back to some more Star Ocean Anamnesis. So, a couple days ago, we had a new update and they added the Misery 2 difficulty, they added a new maze, and they added a new weapon draw. And this draw right here is what we're going to be taking a look at today. So first, let's take a look at the notice, shall we? So they added two new weapon draws. This one, which gives you an increased chance of drawing one of the new 5-star weapons, and this one, which is guaranteed to give you one of the 4 new 5-star weapons. This one right here is limited to once per player. You're only allowed to do 1 10 pull on this. It still costs 3,000 gems, unfortunately. That's quite a lot, and I'm not sure if that's worth it, but we're going to be taking a look at that later. And then you have this one, which gives you a 50% chance of drawing either a 5-star or a 4-star weapon when you do a 10 pull. So you're not guaranteed to get a 5-star weapon, but the chances are in your favor. And then down here we have the weapons, but you can see that in the banner as well. So, well, I guess that's pretty much it for this notice. So let's go to the banner. And here we have the weapon draw. Okay, so one of the new 5-star weapons is this one, Ryugumaru. It's a sword and sheath weapon. So it imbues your attacks with lightning, absorbs 15% of damage dealt, and it reduces damage taken by 10% when targeted by enemy. Attack damage, not intelligence damage, which is symbology. So its attack stat at level 20 is 963 and the intelligence is 964, which is pretty freaking good. But we're gonna go through these factors one by one. So, imbues attacks with lightning. That's really good. If you've ever looked at your character's skills, you can see a tiny circle below the bigger skill circle. Hold on, let me show this off real quick. So if we take a look at Phase here, you can see that he has this tiny little circle next to his actual skill, and that shows what element that skill actually has. That's the symbol for dark element, and that's obviously the element Phase uses. The weapons that we have here imbue your attacks with lightning, your normal attacks as well. So pretty much if you have a weapon like that, all of your attacks can element burst stun bosses that have a weakness or a vulnerability to lightning. So the first factor, imbues attacks with lightning. That one is good enough to warrant you pulling for this weapon on its own, I think. Imbues attack with lightning, amazing. Then we have the second factor, absorbs 15% damage dealt by normal attacks. Now keep in mind this is normal attacks, which means you're probably gonna have to get in really close range to the enemy that you're fighting to actually benefit from this, but 15% of damage dealt by normal attacks, it's also really good. And seeing as how that's not the main draw of this weapon, which is the lightning element, it's just something tacked on, and that's always nice. So second one, also pretty good. And then lastly we have attack damage taken minus 10% when targeted. That's also quite decent, especially because this weapon pairs quite well with Victor, who is a defender, so obviously he has to get in close, but now he has the ability to absorb HP from his enemies with the second factor, and he takes reduced attack damage from his enemies as well. So this works quite well with him, and of course his attacks get lightning element. So if you have him, then I would suggest pulling for this weapon, or well, doing at least 1 pull on this one so that you have that chance of getting this weapon. And let's move on to the second one, shall we? Don't open that one again, come on now. The Arcon CL. I think I pronounced that right. So this one works in kind of the same way, but this one is more for or more aimed towards sharpshooters. It imbues attacks with lightning. Like I said, that's really good. Then we have the hit counter plus 1 second. That's nice, but I wouldn't say that that's necessary. Like, it helps with rush gain, but at the same time, this shouldn't be one of the main draws for this weapon. But seeing as how it already has the lightning element, it's definitely worth pulling for, even though it has basically a useless second factor. It's not useless, but it's kind of disappointing, I would say. And then we have the third one, attack damage dealt plus 20% when you're standing behind a target. Now, for my playstyle, whenever I'm playing a sharpshooter, I don't like to get behind my enemies. I always like to stay in front of them so I can see what they're doing. However, if your playstyle as a sharpshooter depends on getting behind an enemy and then attacking them from there, then you could actually benefit from this. But I personally wouldn't benefit from a factor like this, so for me, that one is kind of moot. But you have to look at your own playstyle and see how this would work for you. Okay, that one was quick. Let's move on to the next one, the Suzakus. Okay, so this one, or the next two weapons, well, this one and the next one, are kind of different from the other two, and I would argue that they're actually worse. So its first factor is damage dealt to demons plus 40%, and that is very situational. You have to actually fight a demon enemy to take advantage of this, but if you are fighting a demon enemy, then that plus 40% is going to be devastating. Plus 40% is no joke. It basically increases your strength by 50%. You could see that, especially when you take the third factor into account, but we're going to take a look at that in a second. So, if you're fighting a demon enemy, this weapon could come in very handy, but if you're not, then it's kind of bad. Well, not bad, but there are better options. Then we have the second factor, AP recovery speed plus 25%. That's amazing, especially because weapon factors and character talents stack with each other. So, you could have this factor and then you could equip this weapon to a character that has a talent that increases their AP recovery speed by maybe 20% or something, and then you almost have a plus 50% increase to your AP recovery speed, which is insane. You'll be spamming your skills, dodging all over the place. Very good. And then for the last factor, we have attack damage dealt plus 10% when not targeted by an enemy. So if you're using this weapon for an attacker or maybe a sharpshooter, well, sharpshooter is kind of less, but if this weapon is equipped to an attacker, I don't know if there are any attackers that have these twin blades as their weapons, but if there are, then you can take advantage of this one. If you're playing a sharpshooter who has increased aggro to enemies, then not so much, but as long as you have a defender in your party who can draw aggro, then this third factor is basically a 10% increase to your attack, and that's always nice. So this one is kind of double-edged sword, no pun intended. I wouldn't pull for this weapon specifically, but if you do get it, I wouldn't be too disappointed because it might have its uses later on. And then lastly, we have the Silver Claws. Okay, so damage dealt to demons plus 40%, I already talked about that. Then we have no flinching when taking damage of 10% HP or less. This one is kind of strange, because no flinching, I've always seen that as also a double-edged sword, because the flinching usually, for me in games, works as a signal that shows me that I took damage. However, if there is no flinching, then sometimes in the heat of battle, you can forget to look at damage numbers, you forget to look at your HP bar, and you won't even notice that you've taken damage. So, no flinching is nice because you can always move even after you've gotten hit, which means you can't get comboed, but at the same time, if it's just a single attack, sometimes you won't even notice that you've taken damage. So, I would say that, again, depends on your playstyle and your preferences. I honestly don't like factors like this or skills like this, but if you do, then that's fine. And then lastly, we have attack plus 5% when behind target. Again, that's very playstyle dependent, but these Silver Claws, their knuckles, they're mostly equipped on attackers, and with my attackers, I like to stand behind enemies because I'm not going to stand in front of an enemy when I'm in close range. That just puts me in harm's way, so I'm going to try to get behind them at all times and attack them from there, which means that this will actually come in handy for me. But then again, 5%, that's not that big. Like, you could say that's kind of negligible, so again, it's not really a main draw to pulling for this weapon. Okay, so we've gone through every single one of these weapons on what's good about them, why you should use them, why you can't use them, and I don't think I talked about the attack and intelligence stat actually, but they're quite decent, almost 1,000 each one, when max limit broken, by the way. But yeah, basically, if you have a defender that uses sword and sheath, or if you have an invoker like Phase, well, I don't think Phase would actually benefit from this, but if you have somebody who uses swords and sheaths, or if you're planning on pulling for somebody who uses that in the future, then give this draw a shot, because you might benefit from it in the future. I'm not going to do it because I'm still saving all of my gems for the near units, and none of them uses any of these weapons, I think. So I'm not really gonna benefit from this. Maybe in a future draw I'll get lucky and pull somebody that could benefit from this, but you don't know that. So I'm not gonna spend 3,000 gems pulling for this. I definitely think it's worth it, at least trying for Ryugumaru or Arcon CL. But yeah, my 2 cents is I personally am not gonna pull. I do think it's worth it to pull, but it all depends on what you're trying to do. If you're saving for specific characters that don't even use these weapons, then don't even bother pulling for this. Okay. I guess that's it. So, I hope that helped. Hope that was informative. And I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.